It's a great honor and privilege to introduce Alan Brazg. We're here in your amazing apartment in Tel Aviv. And Alan, your late mother, Henia, wrote the most amazing book, Passport to Life, and she was a survivor. So as a second generation survivor yourself, could you tell us a little bit about your incredible mother?
Sure. She was quite an amazing woman with an amazing story. She wrote this book as a because she felt importance that her story would be remembered, as apparently the people around her at the time were not expressing what they'd been through. So basically, she survived the Holocaust and somehow found her way to South Africa, the details of which I'll tell you a bit later. And there she was taken in by an aunt of hers that she never knew until after the war. She never met. And married my father, who originally came from Vilkomir in Lithuania in the 20s. He was part of that migration. Had 3 children, and all of us being boys, we obviously grew up in South Africa with a fairly normal life, not as youngsters, not fully aware of what she had gone through in her youth. And like all other South African kids, we grew up in a normal government schools. We all went to Parktown, Saxonwold, grew up in Houghton, and the Holocaust wasn't really something that was on our agenda at that time of our lives. At some point in time, my mother, who had been involved with the Yad Vashem in South Africa, felt the need to record her memories, because she felt that she might never be able to, she might forget them. So as long as she remembered what she remembered from her experiences, she felt it was important to write them down. The sooner the better. So while we were busy growing up and doing our thing, my mother, with the aid of some friends that were associated with her, mainly her uncle. My dad had an uncle, my grandmother's brother-in-law, who ran the Yiddish Kulturfederatie in South Africa. And he had a paper that he was the editor-in-chief of, and he owned the paper. A fellow by the name of Zalman Levy, I think he due some credit as well. She worked for him, knowing Yiddish very well. She was very useful, and she actually was employed by him in the early years, and that's where probably her the seeds of her will to write her memoirs nurtured. So while we were busy playing cricket and rugby and football and tennis and running after the girls and running a normal life, she used to sit at home and days and nights, and for a period of, I don't know, probably a couple of years, writing her manuscripts, her memoirs, until the time that eventually, with the aid of some more professional people, she eventually published this book. When the book came out, or just a little bit prior to the book coming out, she gave us some of the manuscripts to read. And it was at that time that we basically became aware of what she had gone through and experienced. And we started realizing the amazing story of her survival and what she had gone through as a human being, and what the Holocaust was, and how terrible this was on the people, on what they'd done to the Jewish people, and how lucky she was to have survived all of that. So that inculcated in me, to some degree, a feeling of the importance of the Jewish state, giving me some mission that things like that certainly cannot happen again. And in order for them not to happen again, I obviously found myself in a Zionist movement, and being the eldest, probably I was most moved by her book. Probably my younger brothers were a little less moved maybe at that time, although today they participate in every event and they appreciate everything, and they've read the book many times, and they've all feel fully identified with what she's gone through over the years. But to me it affected to the extent that I, being involved in a youth movement, later becoming a Brazg at some point in time. I was head of Cheshmonaim in Beitar in the Transvaal area. My entire years in there were spent. We used to spend them in South Africa at the Shaliach's home, and we used to sleep there. And there was a fantastic group of people, and. At that time, Beitar wasn't that prominent in South Africa. Abonim seemed to be the big thing, and everybody's going there. It was more maybe a social thing. From my point of view, Beitar was important, and I came on Aliyah together with another fellow, and that was the Garin of 1969, the two of us. So while two of us came to South Africa, I obviously was the only one for my school. That came to Israel that year. In fact, out of the 50 Jewish boys at Parktown School in my age group, out of 150, there are only two of us in Israel today. So it meant a lot. I was chairman of the Jewish Society at Parktown Boys. I was very much involved in the later years towards my matriculation in trying to get the message across, bringing guest lecturers and things like that at school. But for me it was important, and Israel was for me the solution. I could see somehow that if we take, everybody needed to participate somehow or other, and for me obviously the fulfillment of one stream is to come and settle Israel and become a part of the society over here. So that's what I did. I came here. My father was an engineer. They had a building company. They were involved with property in South Africa. They said they needed a civil engineer, so they sent me off to study civil engineering. Him and his brother, they were in partnership together, the Brazg brothers. And I went off to the Technion and worked the first year my arse off. Never worked so hard before, because to get into the Technion in those days was very difficult. And I went through a year of learning Hebrew, maths. Our maths and physics in South Africa were below the standards over here even at that time. Came to a country that basically was a third world country. While South Africa had M1 motorways and highways, and everybody had servants, and everyone there. This country took me 4 hours, the early days, to travel from Tel Aviv to Haifa, when the Jewish agency picked me up at the airport and took me off to the Technion. because the road was so bad. I had to go through, the main road was blocked, or whatever, and I had to go through Paris-Khana and Ranana and who knows what to get to Haifa. That was 1969. So, you know, for me, being young, it was a romantic like journey basically, and a whole big experience. But I got into the Technion, got accepted, and studied 4 years civil engineering. The early years were difficult because I didn't have any Hebrew. My Hebrew was terrible. Anglo-Saxon, it wasn't easy for me to study. They sent me off early in the beginning of the time at the Technion to study with some Portuguese kids who were students who were studying there. That we went off to private lessons because our course was too advanced for us at the time. Also came in December, where they already started in October, so it was also a problem. But eventually we got through and we finished and I graduated, and that was the whole story about me starting in Israel. Since then, you know, I never looked back. It's been a great experience, a great adventure. I've had the support of my parents over the years. My father deserves, you know, definitely a word of gratitude as well. Without him, I wouldn't probably have made it, yeah. That's basically my story. Now, regarding my mother, her story is a story of a young girl at the age of growing up a normal life in Vilna. Her youth years were pleasant. They had a wonderful family. The father was well-to-do. He had property there. He was a businessman. He was a dealer with in oatmeal and grains, and he had a sister there that whose husband ran a pharmacy on the premises, and she led a normal life until the age of 12. At the age of 12, the Germans occupied Vilna, and everything was turned upside down. The first things the Germans did when they came in is they gathered up all their men, and they took them off to a prison in the center of Vilna. Obviously, you know, they knocked on the doors and whatever. All the details on this in the book on how he was taken away, but he was taken away, and they never saw him again. It appeared later that the story was that him and all the other men of means or able men in the community, the first thing the Germans did was took them off to Panari, to the forest outside Vilna, and slaughtered them all. The details of actually how she heard that her father was taken to Panari, I don't want to go into all of that now. It's probably all in the book, but that's logical. That's what happened. Things deteriorated in Vilna, and eventually they formed the ghettos, and they started moving everybody into the ghettos. The mother was left with 3 daughters. My mother was the youngest. She was 12. She had an elder daughter, Lisa, who was about 2.5, 3 years older than her, and the eldest daughter, Clara, was about 17 at the time. So there's a 5-year difference between them. They were all taken into the ghetto. They lived in the ghetto for a while, the 5 of them, until the mother, somebody came, one of the neighbors came, and one of the non-religious, the Christians, to notify them that they've met somebody who can somehow get her out of the ghetto, get them out of the ghetto, but he only can take 2 of them. So they had to make a decision, and he insisted that the eldest daughter come with him. So the mother she left the ghetto with the eldest daughter, and the 2 younger kids, my mother and her sister, Lisa, remained in the ghetto with an aunt. Now, during the period, she'd never heard from her mother and her sister again. The ghetto was eventually, I don't want to go through all the details of how they survived in the ghetto and what happened in the ghetto, and how her sister used to steal out of the ghetto to go and fresh bread and bring it back and whatever. But she, it was one of the things. And one night there was an action, and they somehow cleared everybody else. And for some reason, I think it was when they cleared out the ghettos, her middle sister Lisa heard about it and didn't come back to the ghetto. And my mother was left by herself with the aunt initially, and she never saw her sister again. The ghetto was eventually liquidated. They were all taken to the local railway station. They slept over there the night at the local on there while the Germans organised to put them on the trains, and they were sent off to Kaiserburg. I think it was called Kaiserburg. It was a concentration camp in Latvia. I don't know exactly how long it was that they stayed in Kaiserburg, but at some point in time they were there. Kaiserburg was used for most of the Lithuanian, Latvian and Baltic Jews as a labour camp. She being 12, already then they were dividing the woman and the elderly and the young kids and whatever, and everybody's mission was to be able to show her that they were capable of working. Now this is a 12-year-old kid who needed to show that she could do the work of a labourer. So she used to put on high shoes so that she would look older than she was. Anyway, she managed somehow to survive that and get a position as a labourer in this camp, and that's where she worked for the early years of the first of the concentration camps during the war, until the time when the Russians started occupying parts of the Baltic states. And at that point in time, the Germans had to take out all these labourers from these camps and shift them to a camp closer to Germany, which was an area in occupied territories, but outside of the danger of Russian occupation. So they were now put on these trains again, and they were sent off to a camp called Stutov, which I'm sure you might have heard of, which was somewhere near Danzig in Poland. So we're talking about someone moving from the Baltic states closer to Germany. Stutov was on the Baltic Sea, and she found herself there working in a factory making gloves. She was there for quite a period of time, until Poland was being occupied by the Russians. And again, they were being shifted off to areas closer to Germany. In both cases, the camps were labor camps, but they were very brutal. And she explains in some of her videos and some of her stories how the guards shot people, they killed people, and there was no sympathy for anybody. When the Russians eventually started occupying Poland, the Germans started moving them off into Germany. And there she found herself in Buchenwald camp, in a sub-camp called Magdeburg, which was already a death camp. And there she went through some of the horrors of exterminations and waiting in queues and having to, missing the queue by this and chance or whatever, and somehow coming through it all and lasting the whole period of the entire war until it was liquidated by the Russians. By the Russians, yeah. After the war, all those experiences in all of those camps, it was 5 years of terror, of inhumane existence that one had to go through. From 42, I think it was, till about 46 or 40, something like that, about 4 years. She eventually found herself with some people. The camp guards had left the camp, they deserted the camp, they were all left in the camp. They started walking in the forests, they found themselves some connections here and there, managed to get some food, managed to find themselves. Eventually they ended up in a camp in München, where she met some of the survivors, some of the people that she knew in the earlier days that survived from Vilna, from her school. Not that many, but there were a few. One happened to be her best friend, who she met, and her mother survived, and there was a certain bonding there that the mother insisted that she adopt my mother. And she used to spend some time with the mother. The mother was from a very wealthy family in Vilna, and they had organised papers to go to London. And they were on the way to London, and she wanted my mother to come with them. And during the period that she was in this camp in München, which is there, where she found some work. She was actually working they gave her some work in the camp. Her options were to go to Israel. It was the only thing that she had. She didn't have anything else. And one evening, where she went to dinner with Shula, her friend, the mother had a guest at the dinner, and he happened to be a bank manager in Vilna, or worked in a bank. And when he asked what is her name, she said Abramovich, and he said, I had an Abramovich who was a client of mine in the bank in Vilna. And they put two together, and it happened to be that her father was, her ex-father, late father, was a client of his in the bank. And he mentioned that he remembered that the father used to send money to South Africa to the family. From Vilna, he used to send money to his family in South Africa that were battling.
Normally it's the other way around.
Exactly. And she said that, she asked what, she remembered that she did, her mother used to mention that she had a sister in South Africa. She didn't know who they were, she'd never met them. She didn't know who was in the family, how many children, whatever. But yeah, so apparently after they departed and they separated, he put an advertisement in the paper in London, or I think in one of the English papers. Or he placed the advert in South African paper, sorry. And to say that there's Henia Brazg, if anybody knows her in South Africa, will they please contact so-and-so? Well, sure as hell, the family somehow picked up this notification in South Africa and eventually sent her, in those days it was postcards and letters and whatever, say that, yes, please, ask her to contact us. Now, basically her friend had left, and they insisted that she come with him to there, and she said no, she's going to Israel. So the option was Israel or go get adopted by Shula's mother. And she, because her father wanted to go to Israel, she was going to go to Israel. And she had some friends with her, and they were going to go together, and the whole thing. And then she stopped writing to her friend in London, and there was a bit of a disconnect. And before she was due to, she already had dates and everything to leave, she wrote her a postcard to say that, yeah, Shula, there's this, we're going to Israel. And they didn't have an address for her. So when the postcard came, they eventually received the address. They knew where to find her. They sent her back an urgent message, an urgent postcard or whatever it was, to say, please we've made contact with your aunt in South Africa, can you please contact her? And that's what she did. She sent a letter to her aunt in South Africa, and from there it was clear that, that now she had a problem. She had to make a decision because her aunt insisted that she come to South Africa. In those days, life was tough in South Africa, particularly for the Fisher family. I don't know where they lived. They lived somewhere in Babsfontein, Bronkhorstspruit, somewhere like that, outside Pretoria. Some of the family was living in Rhodesia. There was a part of the family that had done pretty well in Rhodesia under the British rule, under the British colonial and southern Rhodesia, to the extent that there was an uncle that became the mayor of Livingston, a guy by the name of Sam Fisher, and he was appointed by the British. And I think he's the guy who basically saw this notification and put things together. So after she'd gone through a lot of deliberations, she decided, she was going to go just stay with her family. I think like family.
Alan, can I just ask you, after your mum was in Buchenwald and the Russians liberated it, and she went to Munich, did she go back to Lithuania?
Yes, she did.
She went back to Vilna to see if there were any survivors from the family.
Yes, she did. She had a harrowing experience. She went back.
She even went to the house.
She went to the house where she lived.
They wouldn't let her in.
They wouldn't let her in. They threw her out.
She could
similar to the experience that we had when we went there now.
She could see the furniture.
They didn't want to know her. She recognised obviously some of the furniture. They just obviously taken over the house.
I think she asked for pictures, and they
wouldn't even give her family pictures. Nothing.
They said don't come back.
No, you're talking about a 17-year-old kid that comes to a strange man. It's all hostilities of hating the Jews. Obviously, the Lithuanians were not big lovers of the Jews either. They were probably the worst. A lot of the killings of the Jews were done by the Lithuanians, apparently, and some of the Ukrainians and others, they were anti-Semites.
There was a Lithuanian mother who helped her, and she tried to contact her, and she had left the town Vilna, and she couldn't ever get in touch with her, and they don't know if she survived afterwards. But she was very unwelcomed when she came back to the apartment.
Very much so. So she just broke down in tears and whatever, and
she asked
made contact with her maid. Her mother had a maid, Brazg, her name was. And she met her.
And she asked, has anybody from the family survived?
Does she know of anybody from the family that should survive?
And no one had survived?
Nobody said.
And on your dad's side as well?
On my dad's side, there's nothing.
I mean,
nothing.
On her father's side, on your mother's...
On your father's side? Nothing. Nothing.
It must have been so horrendous for her to go back and find the reality that she's alone in the world, that none of her siblings, her parents.
Absolutely. It was a harrowing experience. She went back and she travelled and she got on the trains. She didn't have money to pay for the tickets to get on the trains, and she had to evade the inspectors and whatever, and to get all the way there. 7-year-old kid, nothing, nobody. She didn't have anybody she could even. And she met soldiers on the way, and Jewish soldier. And obviously, she even got a proposition by a Jewish Russian soldier to marry her on the train, but that wasn't her priority at that point in time, right? No, she never found anybody, and she left. She came back to Munich, and no hope. Couldn't find any connections. Later in the year, she managed to pick up a few connections, people she had met, people who knew other people, and many years of her life were, and a lot of this was in a book about letters that she sent to cousins and people who know, or people that heard about her sister's story, because her sister, apparently the story with her sister was that they picked her up and they put her in a camp and they sent her to work in a factory somewhere in the area there in Vilna, in an ammunitions factory, and the factory was bombed by the Allies, and all their laborers were killed, and that's how her sister died. So that's one of the stories that she heard from a boyfriend or somebody who was a friend of her sister. Each one had its story. When I came on the visit in '99, one of her missions was to go to the village where her mother and her elder sister were supposed to have gone, where her elder sister was supposed to have got a job there as a teacher in the village. And we went out there with a Jewish policeman from Vilna, and we tried to find some link or somebody. Now we're talking, this is '99, from 43.
And this is the first time the first time your mom had gone back to Lithuania.
Yeah, because it was Iron Wall, South Africa was there, no connections, communist country. No way to get into there. I was only after the collapse of
and just before, can I ask, it must have been very difficult for your mother to go back.
It was. It was. She deliberated seriously about going on that trip, because it brings back a lot of terrible memories. But she felt that she had to do it. It's like, when you have some sort of post-trauma sort of situation or psychological situation, sometimes you have to go and face the reality to be able to
close
a circle or live a normal life, or be able to at least say, I've done my best. So yeah, that's the only time she went back. So after 66 years, we go down to this village and we're trying to find people, and the 80-year-olds and the 90-year-olds, they don't remember anything anyway. So found nothing over there. So to this day, we don't know what happened to them, where they are, where they're buried, who knows. And then the father's buried in Penari. The sister, we don't know where she was buried.
And Alan, can you relate when your mom went to her apartment, when she went to try and she found the...
I don't, to go into the details of how she felt and whatever, it's all in the book.
No, when you went back with her.
When I went back with her.
99, yeah.
Oh, okay, 99. Yeah, look, firstly, the group was so supportive of her. That was fantastic. It was like, she was she was the star of the show there. I mean, you know, and it was for her. It was also like, you know, it was a little bit of a relief to be able to see that people were actually, you know, they were interested in the memories and they wanted to know what people experienced, and she could actually give those stories firsthand. That organised. You know, we were all on this bus and we were travelling around. They were taking us to, you know, one day we were in the ghetto, and one day we were in the Ponari, and one day we were off seeing the centre of town or whatever it was, and there. But it was mostly around Ponari and there. But there was this time that they decided they were going to go and help my mother find her apartment. Kalavaska Street number 9 or something like that, or whatever it was. Yeah? Kalavaska Street. So, I don't think she had the number. I don't think she remembered the number exactly. But she remembered there was a church, and she remembered it there. And when we got there, everybody on the bus was, you know, it was like this. It was like this. You know, going to find. What are you looking for? Treasure hunt is the word, right? It was this treasure. I mean, you're looking for this treasure, and we try to find this place where she writes in a book of 20. I don't know how many apartments he had there. It's a big plot and whatever. We don't know what we're going to come and see. So they were all very, very intense, and it was all very. But eventually we find she recognises something. And so we go up the road, we go down the road, and at the beginning she's not quite sure if it's that. And then eventually she says, yes, that's where it is. That's just after 66 years. Suddenly she's remembered now, from the age of 12 to 78, right? 66, 78, she's 78 now. And policeman comes out, and I've got my camera, and my brother's there, and we're all sitting on the bus there looking, or whatever it is. And I don't remember if people got out of the bus, but I think that might have made them feel a little unhappy, or whatever it is. I don't know if the people were actually in the bus, but she got out, she walked with the policeman, sort of let her go forward, and she knocked on a door, and somebody came out, and they were communicating in Lithuanian. I didn't know Polish. I didn't know exactly what they were saying. But it was clear that some of the people that were living in the area there, it was mainly sort of like homeless people or unemployed people. They were like, it was a very poor area and neglected area. Obviously, the government had not done very much with these properties, maybe because of the fear that the Jewish people at some point in time would put a claim to it anyway, so why go and develop it at all or whatever. And I assume that these are second generation, third generation people that might have grown up there or whatever. Some of the people were probably in their 70s or close to that or something like that, so they might have remembered something. But there was some man that she met came out of the house there, and he talked to her for a while, and then some young people came up and they started harassing her, and the policeman got involved, and then the policeman said, look, these are dangerous people, we better leave. And basically that was, it was all very disappointing, because we couldn't communicate with anybody there, and obviously nobody's going to say, yeah, we occupied the house, it's not our house, it belonged to some Jewish family or something like that. And we left. It was a bit of a disappointing visit, but I think it was very important that at least we were able to identify the house, and it's all on video now, and who knows, maybe one day there might be a skyscraper over there, and a World Trade Center or something like that, and we might get half of the building. Who knows? I think in the meantime, all our efforts I made applications for Lithuanian private citizenship, and they told me no, it's not yours. Certainly not because she lived in Vilna at the time, because Vilna was occupied by Poland, so the Lithuanians said, we don't give any rights to anybody who didn't live under the Lithuanian state. Didn't matter that you lived under Polish state. If you lived under the Lithuanian state, then we might give you rights. Which I eventually tried to do through my father, because he was born under a Lithuanian state in the 20s, in the early 20s. But the Lithuanians didn't cooperate with us at all on that. And
but Alan, was
my grandfather's side, my mother's father was. He was one of the leaders of the community. Apparently, my mother always used to tell us about the Vilna Balabesel, not the Gaon of Vilna, but the Vilna Balabesel, who she was a descendant of. Now, I don't know who the Vilna Balabesel was, what his function in the community was, but they were part of a pretty significant community over there. The father was part of the community, and he came here on trips to Palestine in those years before the war, in the 30s, to buy land for members of the community. Now, we don't know what happened to that land, if he bought land, he didn't buy land. The only thing we know is that it was somewhere in the Petah Tikva area.
Her father did a few trips. He actually made about 2 or 3 trips.
He made a couple of trips. We don't exactly know how many. We don't know where he came to. I've tried through some of the organizations about Jewish Holocaust victim properties or whatever it is.
He wanted to immigrate. Your grandfather, your mom's father wanted to immigrate.
He wanted to immigrate. He was believed in Jabotinsky's words of liquidate the Golan before Golan liquidates you. She wouldn't. The mother wouldn't immigrate. She liked the good life in Vilna. It's too difficult to immigrate. She wasn't going to come here and work the fields and whatever it is. They were cultural people over there. They had a good life. And not everybody could see the future the way some people did. All his efforts obviously were to no avail. In fact, he even mentions to the children at some point in time that a lot of their wealth he's hiding under the house.
Yeah.
And he's going to put it under some boards in the house there, and he showed them where he put obviously some of the jewelry or whatever it was, in case of times of bad times, because he was more of a pessimist than the mother. What happened to that, God only knows. Those houses are still there apparently, but who knows.
And was your mum happy that she went on that trip in '99?
Very much so, yeah. And I think the fact that I joined her was a big thing.
And she met her granddaughter.
For me, it was an eye opener as well. I mean, to go through, the Vilna, the ghettos, and showing us where they used to go, run out of the ghetto.
It must have been incredible having first hand.
She tried to find in which house she lived in the ghetto or whatever it is, which she couldn't quite recognize. But she recognized the place of when they liquidated the ghetto, where they were taken to, right? And it was an experience. Definitely the ghetto and Ponari and I mean, it's very horrendous what they did there. The way they managed to conceal this mass murder of all these Jews in these forests there.
Your mum mentions, and my brother actually videoed, that there were some people that had survived and they came back to Vilna to warn the people what's going on in Ponari.
That's right.
And they thought they were crazy. No one believed them.
That's right.
They didn't believe that such a thing could happen, and they thought they were like crazy.
Well, stories were, but until they actually spoke to some of the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Alan, did your mom leave you guys with a message? What was her? What was her? Having gone through the harrowing experiences and the hair raising and what she went through, what did she instill in her children and her grandchildren? What message did she give you?
Firstly, for me to come here was fulfillment of a dream. She writes that in her book. Right? At least we can carry on. Now, what basically, and her message is that obviously a message of we can't allow humanity to forget these horrendous atrocities. Just unbelievable. And now when we talk about today in Israel about the Iranian issue and whether we should sign an agreement or whether we shouldn't sign an agreement and whatever, and you have a country there that's propagating the destruction of the State of Israel, you don't need to go too far from the Holocaust to be able to see that this can happen again. And we have to do everything in our power to stop these things. And obviously, the efforts of Jewish people in Israel and the community and wherever we've come from all over the world has been able to create here a vision of security for Jewish people all over the world.
And could you show a picture of your mom? There's a beautiful picture with your mom and your dad.
Yeah, this is my mother and dad on their wedding. She's 7 years younger than him. He's 27, she's 19 or something. She was only in South Africa for a couple of years before, he met her. And didn't take too long for him to, which is quite amazing because he was, South African boys who really didn't, obviously they'd gone through the war, he was in the South African Army, and he didn't fight in the Second World War, but he was mobilized and probably meant something to him, but I think her story and whatever meant a lot, and I think a lot of it is the fact that she was a good-looking woman.
She was an amazing.
What else can I show you here? This is my parents. Going out for dinner in the early years. This is like early 50s, end of the war.
It's amazing. So Alan, I just want to show you, I just want to thank you, but Alan, if I can just show you here, this is from your mom's book, and here is at West Park, at the Jewish cemetery.
That's right.
They have on Yom HaShoah.
That's right.
And here you are with Beitar.
Yeah, my Beitar uniform.
In your Beitar uniform, and this is your mom lighting a candle for Yad Vashem.
Right.
And
every year she was guest of honor, and she'd give a speech.
And here's your mom speaking at this incredible
she'd give a speech,
ceremony.
She'd talk about her memories. She had it all worked out. I mean, every year it was a talk to the whole community. Jewish community of Johannesburg used to turn out at West Park Cemetery, and it was a big event for us. Yeah.
So I actually attended.
That's my brother. That's my brother, Clark.
You'll just show it on the.
Yeah.
And I was actually very fortunate.
Lighting the candles.
We used to attend every year as well. It was the community. It was a big event.
Big event.
Once a year we would go to Yad Vashem to the West Park where they have the 6 shofars. It's the most beautiful memorial. And your mom spoke. So Alan, having a picture of you standing there, your mom must have been so proud of you and your brothers, and I just want to thank you, Alan. I really want to thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor and a privilege. Really, thank you. It's really been such a First of all, to read the book and to have seen the video footage that my brother did, that you were on that trip.
Amazing. He's got some memories there in his video clips. In fact, one of the clips is something that every time I see something, I reread the stories, or I get something like your brother's clip, I get a new revelation. The last, what you just said to me now was the experience she explains on one of her videos where she's in Majdanek, I think. No, yes, and she's explaining how she was in the camps, and because she was too weak to climb to the top bunk, she used to sleep on the bottom bunk. And there were bugs in the bunk, in the beds, in the sheet, the blankets that they used to sleep on. And every time one of the people would go on one of the upper bunks on her and wipe the blanket, all the bugs would come down on her. And she used to sleep with all the bugs on her all the time in this camp, until one night in the middle of winter, she felt that she couldn't handle it anymore. She was full of bugs all over. She had to run to a tap in the middle of the winter, a cold water tap, to clean off these bugs, to get these bugs out of her body. And she explains how she took off all her clothes and she went out of the bunk, out of the building. And one of the guards saw her going out of the building, and she said she was sure that they were going to kill her, but she wasn't going to. She was adamant to clean these bugs out of her body. She couldn't live with them anymore. So she was ready to risk her life. That's what she says on the video. Your brother did. I've never seen that before. So it's amazing stuff, definitely.
Well, Ellen, your mom really was amazing, and I know that she's so proud of you and your brothers, and may her memory be for eternal blessing.
Thanks, Les.
And I really want to thank you.
Hopefully, our people will remember. We'll remember these things and not do stupid things in the future, because they've forgotten what we've gone through.
Yeah, never to forget.
Never forget. Yeah.
Ellen, thank you so much.
Pleasure.